first two books of Dreamfall Chapters have absolutely rocked our twin worlds, with their huge environments, atmospheric world building, and expertly crafted narrative. Rebels in particular provided a runtime to rival most episodic seasons, and ended on a shocking cliffhanger. If anything, we've been spoiled rotten by Red Thread Games up until now. But as a result, Book 3 doesn't quite hit the same marks as the previous installments. Make no mistake though, surprising revelations and long-awaited returns make Book 3 an important episode, but it did come off more as a setup for the remainder of the story than anything else. The interlude with newcomer Saga that kicked off the episode was a mix of charm, nostalgia, and absolute frustration. Pixel hunting around a 3D environment looking for proximity-triggered items had me wandering around a lot longer than I was expecting, but the annoyance was swayed by Saga's observations, especially when she was wearing hats. The thing is, I don't think that the pixel hunt was the biggest offender of the scene. No, that belongs to the picture sorting puzzle at the end. I managed to complete it in 2 attempts thanks to my knowledge of the series, although I'm very glad that correct placement stayed put. But that said, I can't help but feel that players using Dreamfall Chapters as their entry to the series would be utterly lost here. While trial and error is a legitimate tactic, it goes against previous statements that newcomers would be able to jump in to the series without needing to play The Longest Journey or Dreamfall, or, in this case, heading over to GameFAQs for a solution. It's just a shame because it leads to what I assume is an important moment for Saga and the story as a whole. Proceedings return to normal when we rejoin Kian and Zoe later on, and I continue to be impressed by how Red Thread Games evolve the in-game locations as the story progresses. The festival happening in Marcuria added a vibrant veil over the apparent oppressive atmosphere, while the martial law happening in Propast managed to make the dystopian future even more depressing. While there isn't as much to discover on your travels this time around, what is there is up to the usual high standard that we've come to expect from the games, thanks to the well-written inner monologues and overheard conversations. Kian's adventures in Marcuria in particular provide some fantastic personal moments, as he finally opens up to other characters and also declares his love of yams. But he also plays a role in a very important reveal for the series. Unfortunately, it is during those revelations that the episode brings about my biggest criticism, a lack of interaction during the conversations. I was very aware that I was doing nothing while watching exposition being bombarded at me, instead of being able to ask questions like I have done in previous episodes. And, well, that was just disappointing, really. You could argue that the importance of these scenes call for concentration, but there are several other similar scenes throughout Book 3. As a result, it actually makes the episode feel incredibly linear, despite the fact that diverging threads continue to be thrown at the player in obvious and subtle ways. At the same time, it also makes the game feel shorter because of the lack of interaction, despite the fact that there is over 2 hours of gameplay in Book 3. Again, both issues seem to stem from the fact that we've been spoilt with the first 2 installments, but I do hope that conversations return to more free-form style in the next book. That's not to say that all conversations weren't interactive, as some of Zoe's sections did manage to include some humorous, if ultimately unimportant choices. Book 3 also debuted Zoe's much-discussed new haircut, which, if you ask me, looked pretty sweet, although, it did come at the cost of her losing some skin. Yeah. Anyway, watching her deal with the events at the end of Book 2 and finally make a stand against Watticorp helped build up the urgency on her side of the story. It also led to the long-awaited return of fan favourite Crow. The former sidekick of the month was on fine form during Book 3, providing wisecracks and terrible puns aplenty, and his animation in particular was better than some of the other characters. With some sections involving stealth-esque gameplay, i.e., don't run, I was glad to see that Red Thread Games had included a quick restart feature, resetting the action almost instantaneously. Considering how most modern adventure games have that "you died, mission failed" screen that sends you back to poorly chosen checkpoints, it was good to see how common sense and convenience of the player has prevailed in this case. There were a few other issues of note from my playthrough though. The volume levels for certain characters, especially the main ones as you wander around levels, continue to be too low at certain points, and as a result there were some times where I completely missed out on what was being said, especially the case with Saga's conversations with her dad. It was also a shame that I, along with a number of other players, were affected by a bug that altered choices made in previous episodes. While Red Thread Games were commendably quick to fix it, it did mean that I had to play through Book 3 a second time, which somewhat worked out in my favour as I managed to pick better outcomes and explore different puzzle solutions. However, it must be noted that the game crashed significantly during my time playing Book 3. While I sympathise that the team at Red Thread Games is quite small, I certainly hope that those sorts of problems are fixed in the future. I'll admit that I have been fairly critical of Book 3, but the truth is that the narrative is still as gripping as it has ever been, the choice is still as difficult at this stage without knowing the bigger picture, and the cast of characters is still a delight to interact with. It's almost as if Red Thread Games have used the slightly linear and slower approach of Book 3 as a setup for the remaining episodes. Hopefully this means that we can get back to wider exploration in terms of both locations and conversations in Book 4, as we definitely have a new area to visit next time. In short, a lack of conversation branches and slightly shorter runtime mean that Book 3 doesn't shine as brightly as previous episodes did, and some frustrating bugs have provided unnecessary annoyance. However, despite these issues, the narrative continues to build up to what will hopefully be an action-packed final 2 episodes. Important revelations of a personal and grander nature, along with a long-awaited return, make Book 3 a slower but entertaining setup before the inevitable storm for Zoe and Kian.